This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain an action, fantasy, horror film called Dororo. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. After being wounded in battle, Daigo Kagemitsu unlocks a temple to consult with the 48 demons residing there. Daigo tells the demons that his father and brothers were killed during the war with Kanayama. He fears that his entire clan will be obliterated, so he asks them what they want in exchange for the power to defeat his enemies as well as the authority to rule the world. Soon, a dying rat on the floor tells him that he must surrender his unborn child. Daigo agrees and tells the demons to divide his son's body and distribute it amongst themselves. The demons strike Daigo with lightning to carve the proof of their agreement on his forehead. A priest warns Daigo that he will regret the pact, but Daigo kills him and assures himself that he won't feel any remorse. 2 decades after the unholy pact, a man who has earned the name Hyakimaru wanders through the desert and approaches the city. He ends up in a tavern where a man offers to read his palm. The palm reader is astounded as soon as he gets a look at the man's hand because he realizes that Hyakimaru should have been dead years ago. Hyakimaru suddenly stands up and approaches the stage when he sees a masked woman dancing. A man strikes Hyakimaru with a sword, so he blocks it with his hand, but he doesn't bleed despite being cut. The man then slides off the sword, detaching Hyakimaru's hand and revealing a blade beneath it. Hyakimaru proceeds to attack the woman on stage and slices off her mask to reveal that she's not human. Before long, the woman transforms into a crab demon and attacks Hyakimaru. After skillfully dodging the demon's claws, Hyakimaru hides behind a table, but the crab shoots its claw through the wood and pierces his chest. Within a few seconds, however, Hyakimaru gets up and heals his injury. Meanwhile, a young thief enters the tavern and hides from her pursuers. Everything seems quiet when she looks around, but Hyakimaru soon emerges on top of the demon and decapitates it. Soon, a man arrives to catch the thief, but he's astonished when he sees Hyakimaru reattaching his left arm to cover his blade. Moments later, Hyakimaru drops to the floor and contorts in pain. His lower right leg soon detaches, but another leg grows in its place. The terror-stricken thief and her pursuer run outside to get away from Hyakimaru. The pursuer tells the thief a rumor that a man once came to the Red Rust Mountain where a man-eating monster resides. He notes that people started suspecting that the man was a monster when he came out of the mountain alive. Later, the thief sees Hyakimaru talking with Bipa, a traveling storyteller. When Hyakimaru leaves, the thief asks Bipa if Hyakimaru is a monster. Bipa discloses that the shaman found Hyakimaru in a basket along the river when he was still a baby. However, the infant was missing most of his body parts, so the shaman reconstructed his body by collecting parts from children who died in the war. Soon, the shaman was able to create a heart and make it beat with a spark of electricity. Little by little, the shaman attached other parts to the infant and cast a spell to help him endure the new body. When Bipa visited the shaman's house, he found goblins begging for the infant's body. Bipa showed him a blade and told the shaman that it was forged to kill goblins that once overrun a village. He disclosed that the sword was sealed with the blacksmith's vengeance because the goblins killed his wife and child. Bipa gave the sword to the shaman, hinting that it was destined to be in the hands of the infant when he grows up. A few years passed and the shaman attached a blade into the boy's arm, but he noted that he would have to wait until he grows up before the sword of vengeance could be affixed to his left arm. Soon, the shaman began training Hyakimaru to defend himself with a sword. Although Hyakimaru can't see or hear, he can sense everything around him with his powerful mind. Hyakimaru grew into a man believing that the shaman was his father. One day, he found the shaman lying on the floor on the verge of death. Hyakimaru offered to heal the shaman using the healing arts he learned, but the shaman instructed him to burn down the house along with his spellbooks because he didn't want warlords to acquire the knowledge to become immortal. After the shaman attached the blade of vengeance into his arm, he confessed to Hyakimaru that he was not his birth father. When the shaman passed away, Hyakimaru did as he commanded and burned down the house. As Hyakimaru was about to leave, he heard a voice disclosing that his body parts had been distributed to 48 demons, who were using them to terrorize people. The mysterious voice then told him to slay all 48 demons with a blade in his arm if he wants his body back. Bipa tells the thief that Hyakimaru has already killed his third demon when they met for the second time. The thief becomes interested in Hyakimaru's sword when she learns that his real left arm will grow back when he slays the demon who stole it. Soon, she starts following Hyakimaru covertly, but he immediately senses her presence, so she decides to come out in the open. Although the thief pretends to be male, Hyakimaru detects that she's a woman. When Hyakimaru asks her name, she tells him that professional thieves don't have names to avoid getting arrested. Hyakimaru discloses that he has been called several names, one of them being Dororo. The thief likes the name, so she tells Hyakimaru to refer to her as Dororo. From that moment on, Hyakimaru tells her not to follow him, but Dororo expresses her interest in Hyakimaru's sword and tells him that she intends to steal it when it falls off his arm. While the two are resting by the river, a gruesome-looking baby approaches them. Hyakimaru immediately draws his sword, but he realizes it poses no threat when it calls out for its mother. Hyakimaru takes the large baby to the ruins of a temple and tells Dororo that it's made of about 20 spirits of children who died when the temple burned down. When Dororo introduces herself to the baby, Hyakimaru informs her that the name means little monster, and it's also used to refer to strange creatures who look human. Later, Dororo and Hyakimaru see a couple offering food and a prayer to the children. When they realize that it's a temple where people abandoned their baby, Dororo castigates the couple and tells them that they're inhuman for what they did to their child. The couple responds by pointing out that they're living miserable lives due to ruthless tyrants like Kanayama. They note that Daigo eventually replaced him, but he became much worse, so they felt they had no choice but to abandon their child. Dororo notes that her village burned down during the war too, but her parents fought back until they died. When Dororo and Hyakimaru leave the temple, they encounter Sabame, who invites them to rest at his home in exchange for the tales of their travels. Upon their arrival, they are greeted by Sabame's wife and 7 identical girls. One of the girls asks them to surrender their weapons, so Hyakimaru gives them the sword he carries on his waist. Later, Sabame tells him that the temple burned down a few days ago after it was struck by lightning. Sabame expresses his sadness as he recounts that the children were killed in the fire. As Hyakimaru and Dororo go to sleep, the 7 girls discuss plans to kill the two and eat them. Moments later, the girls turn into a gigantic larvae and heads for their room. When they get there, they find Dororo lying on the floor. As they start to crowd around her, Hyakimaru jumps from the ceiling and slashes them all with a blade in his arm. Suddenly, the large baby appears and points them toward another room. When they investigate, they find a passage to an underground tunnel that leads to a room full of children's bones. In another room, they find numerous monster eggs. As they keep exploring, they find a passage back to the burnt temple and realize that it was the demon's feeding ground. They deduce that the wife posed as a nun and took the abandoned kids to the tunnel. Dororo decides to wake up the townspeople, while Hyakimaru returns to the house to confront Sabame. She explains to the townspeople that they've been feeding their children to monsters and advises them to take arms to get rid of them. Hyakimaru subdues Sabame and appeals to his conscience to convince him to abandon his demonic wife. Before Sabame can respond, the demon stabs them both in the back. Sabame dies, but Hyakimaru just pulls out the sword and gets up to confront the demon. The wife transforms herself into a moth and flees from the house. She tries to fly away, but the spirit of the babies she killed takes her back to the ground, where she gets slashed by Hyakimaru. Moments after the monster's death, Hyakimaru drops to the ground and regurgitates his old liver. The townspeople surmise that Hyakimaru is also a monster, so they drive them out of the village. Days later, Hyakimaru kills a cherry blossom tree monster to get back his ears. Afterward, he slays a giant lizard with Dororo's help to get back his throat. Next, Hyakimaru confronts a monster with bird's wings. As he struggles to fight against the demon, Dororo helps him by dropping a large rock on its head. The monster starts coming after her, so Hyakimaru immediately attacks him to keep the demon's attention on him. The flying demon dives toward Hyakimaru while his back is turned, but Hyakimaru immediately turns around and strikes him rapidly with his swords. Before the demon dies, he realizes that Hyakimaru is Daigo's son, so he tells him that he should be mad at his father. When Hyakimaru regains his right arm, Dororo expresses her disappointment that it wasn't the arm with the blade of vengeance. As Dororo and Hyakimaru continue their journey, they come across an area that used to be the borders that divides the kingdoms of Kanayama and Daigo. When Dororo sees Daigo's castle in the distance, she tells Hyakimaru that she intends to slay Daigo and everyone in his clan. Dororo reveals that Daigo shot her father with arrows when he tried standing up to his army. Her mother fled with her to the forest and told her to live as a man. She told Dororo that she could only start living as a woman again when she meets a real man like her father. Soon after their escape, her mother died, leaving Dororo to fend for herself. The next day, Hyakimaru goes to the city to look for a job. A group of men tries to attack him at the saloon, but he quickly beats them up. A man named Tahomaru is instantly impressed by Hyakimaru's fighting skills, so he offers him a job. When they get to the castle, Tahomaru introduces himself as Daigo's son. He asks Hyakimaru what he thinks of his father, but Hyakimaru doesn't respond. Tahomaru notes that he intends to inherit his father's throne and stop the war once and for all by uniting the land. On their way to Daigo's room, they come across Tahomaru's mother, Yuri. So he introduces Hyakimaru to her as a new hireling. Yuri recognizes the mark on Hyakimaru's robe, so she tries to touch it and asks him how he got it. When Hyakimaru grabs her hand, he sees her memory of the time she abandoned her son at the river. Daigo wanted to kill the child, but Yuri begged him to let the infant live. Soon, Yuri realizes that Hyakimaru is her son and starts referring to him as Tahomaru. When Hyakimaru attempts to leave, Tahomaru follows him and threatens to strike him with a sword, but Hyakimaru punches him in the gut. Later, Yuri tells Daigo that the son they abandoned has made his way to them. She regrets that she named their second child after the son they abandoned. Daigo refuses to believe her because he doesn't think their son would be perfectly healthy after all these years. Unbeknownst to Yuri, Tahomaru is outside the room and hears the whole conversation. When Hyakimaru meets with Dororo later, he tells her that they can no longer stick together because he's Daigo's son. Dororo refuses to believe him, so he asks her to touch his hand to let her see everything he learned at the castle. Dororo stabs him through the heart, but Hyakimaru remains unharmed and points out that he hasn't regained his real heart yet. Suddenly, Beepa appears and tells them about the night Daigo made a deal with demons. Hyakimaru tells them that he wants to take revenge on Daigo, but Dororo points out that it would be wrong to kill his own father. Later, Beepa advises Dororo to abandon her plans to avenge her parents, but she argues that their deaths will be meaningless if she doesn't kill Daigo. While Hyakimaru is sitting by the river, a demon dog approaches him from behind. As Hyakimaru prepares to attack it, another dog emerges and bites his right arm. After letting him go, one of the dogs points out that he's feeling pain in his arm because it's his real flesh and blood. The dog taunts that he won't gain anything by recovering his whole body because his parents still won't accept him. After he kills the two dogs, Hyakimaru regains his real eyes. When he sees Dororo for the first time, she immediately tells him that she will no longer seek revenge against Daigo. She advises him to do the same and move on with his life. The following day, Daigo complains that taking over the world is taking too long. A demon suddenly appears and tells him that the world is within reach, but his son is blocking his path. Fearing that his son threatens the future of his kingdom, Daigo heads out of the castle to deal with Hyakimaru himself. While Hyakimaru and Dororo are admiring the landscape at the border, Tahomaru and his men suddenly shoot them with cannons. Dororo attempts to fight back, but Beepa holds her down. Soon, Tahomaru approaches Hyakimaru and tells him that he needs to die because there's only enough room for one of them. Before long, the soldiers attack Hyakimaru, and Tahomaru soon joins in. Two of the soldiers end up stabbing each other when Hyakimaru dodges their blades. Another soldier strikes Hyakimaru and breaks his sword when he blocks it. Their mother arrives on a horse, only to find that the broken blade has pierced Tahomaru's throat. Daigo soon arrives to kill Hyakimaru, but Yuri stands in his way. Determined to kill his son, Daigo strikes Yuri with a sword. Hyakimaru is distraught by his mother's death and engages Daigo in a sword fight despite Dororo's attempts to stop him. When Hyakimaru manages to cut him in the stomach, Daigo asks him how he got his body, so Hyakimaru disclosed that his father made it for him. Daigo defiantly tells him that he still doesn't regret what he did, because their clan would have been annihilated if he didn't make the deal. When Daigo attacks him again, Hyakimaru subdues him, but he restrains himself from killing him. Hyakimaru lets him go and tells him to build the ideal world that Tahomaru wanted. Suddenly, a demon takes possession of Tahomaru's body and offers to bring him back to life in exchange for Daigo's body. Hyakimaru warns Daigo that the demon on the throne will be disastrous for the kingdom, but Daigo still surrenders his body to the demon. Tahomaru comes back to life as soon as the demon possesses Daigo. The demon attempts to return to the castle, but Daigo regains control of the body and stabs himself. When the demon regains control of Daigo, he jumps off the horse to attack, but Hyakimaru manages to cut him with a blade of vengeance. As Daigo's life starts to fade, he tells Tahomaru to take over the throne. Dororo asks Daigo to apologize to Hyakimaru, but he just begs her to look after Hyakimaru for his sake. After Daigo's body explodes into dust, Hyakimaru regains his heart. Soldiers aim their arrows at Hyakimaru, but Tahomaru signals them to put their weapons down. After Hyakimaru expels his old heart, he laments that the pain in his chest won't go away. At the castle, Tahomaru offers the throne to Hyakimaru, but he tells his brother that he still needs to slay the remaining demons. Tahomaru stresses that he will wait until Hyakimaru finishes his quest because he believes he is the rightful ruler. Later, Hyakimaru goes to the border to meet Dororo. When she sees him, she tries holding back her tears, but she ends up bawling like a child. Hyakimaru attempts to hug her, but Dororo kicks him in the groin and reminds him not to let his guard down. Afterward, they head to the coast to gaze upon the sea for the very first time.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.